Renee, thank you so much for joining me for our conversation today.
I'm happy to be here.
We have a little delay, so we're going to try and not talk over the top of each other, but we may end up doing that as we go. So I would just like to introduce you to our viewers, and just want to introduce to all of you who are watching my dear friend Renee DeMont, who was a participant in the Narrative Project and then worked with me for a number of months on revisions. And we're here today to talk about a little bit about the inception of her book, A Careless Man's Careful Daughter, and the way that she's managed talking about trauma or working with her trauma as she's been writing this book about her early childhood trauma. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, Renee, and feel free to sort of share what you want to share. Don't share what you don't want to share, but really appreciate you being here today to help us think about how to write about traumatic experiences without doing ourselves in.
Okay.
So the first question I have is, would you tell us a little bit about the story that you're writing? Give us a synopsis.
Sure. It's a memoir. Unlike most, it contains both my childhood and parts of my adulthood. The arc spans the entire thing. I was homeless as a child and went into foster care and ultimately was adopted out. And my challenges did not end there. My biological family came back into my life, and that was a really tough time for me to try and balance all these different families and to figure out who I was. A big part of this book is trying to figure out who I am. And I've discovered that I'm a little bit of every one of these people that have had a part in making sure that I survived. And benefit of writing this book is, rather than look back and think about what I missed out on and what I was lacking, I look back now and I thank God for whatever it was that each of those couples could give me. There were three: Mama and Daddy, my foster parents, Bertha and Buzz, and my adopted parents, Bob and Margie. Each of them gave me enough of the whole spectrum of love, and each lacked enough that I had to stretch a little bit to reach the stars that I really wanted in my life. And I think that was a good thing in the end. Yeah. It's been a very cathartic process. Yeah.
Yeah. And Renee, why did you write this book? Can you talk about what sparked the decision to do it?
Specifically, it was my brother Jason reached out. There are 7 of us. Always said that we're the bookends of a very sad story. And we never lived a day together. We're 12 years apart. He was born after I went into foster care, but I knew that he existed. But at one point, I was brought back into his life. And then he graduated high school, went into the service, and he kind of disappeared. But then he found me on Facebook, and he wanted to know, but I know that this is what he wanted. He wanted to know he wasn't alone. Mm-hmm. We had lived the same childhood. And so I began to write stories. I'd get up at 2 a.m. because I had a busy life. I was running a company, and I had busy twin 4th graders and running around the house. I'd start writing him stories. And at one point, he couldn't believe it. He said that's exactly what I was talking about our father, and I said he was my dad too. And I think that really meant a lot to him. So he was the catalyst. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hadn't really talked about it much before because I was just busy creating this new life. Right. But I needed to do that for my brother.
Yeah, right. And then, once you did start and you really got going in earnest, what were some of the emotional challenges that you faced in going backwards to really some pretty traumatic events and moving your way through that story? What were those emotional challenges?
The full gambit, everything. I did not realize I was beginning that this flawless surface that I had created, it was polished and there were no cracks. But when I began to write and I began to remember, and someone told me once that if you do it right, if you write it correctly, you will relive those emotions and the trauma. I must have done it right because I had a complete and total nervous breakdown. So I wouldn't recommend that. But I needed to face these memories, these experiences that I had never dealt with before. So it was a good thing in the end. It was terrifying as I went through it. If I could do it again, I would have, the minute I began, I would have hired a therapist immediately. I did not know that I was beginning to shatter until I was in a million pieces on the floor. So I think for anyone that is going to write about anything, even if you think that you got through it and without wounds, you didn't. None of us escape without wounds. And if you're going to tear off that bandage and inspect those wounds to see how really deep they are, have a doctor right next to you because he can help you really understand what's going on underneath those bandages. So that's what I would have done differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And once you did realize that that the writing of this book was taking its toll on you, what did you do for yourself in order to manage the emotions that came up? What were some of the things that you put into place so that you could keep writing?
Boundaries. I had to go to my therapist 3 times a week. I had to check in with my friends. I had to try and understand what I was feeling. Anxiety is fear of the future. Depression is not dealing with the past. I didn't understand all of that before. I never gave it much thought. And when I started to look at things, when I gained more wisdom, when I read books and educated myself, and I talked to other survivors of different kinds of childhood trauma, talking to my brother Jason. Originally, I wrote this for him, but I realized that knowing that he was there for me as well, that was huge. You have to keep reminding yourself that you're not alone because trauma tends to isolate us. We feel like that no one went through what we went through. But there are so many people that need to know that they're not alone. Mm-hmm. And so that helped me. I had to keep reminding myself and going to the doctor. And something that was really valuable, and I did not realize this until I began critique. I had the supportive writing group. I began to look at my revisions not as returning to the scene, but as making the scene as truthful as possible. It was about the writing instead of the reliving. And once I had understood that bridge or crossed that bridge, I was in a much better place. I could look back and say, okay, I'm just looking back now to make the scene as strong and as truthful as I can. So any notes that I got from the other writers were really, I'm sorry, they were constructive. Mm-hmm. I looked at them as constructive and not personal. And once you can set yourself aside, but that takes a while because when you're first pouring out your guts and weep and you're going to be, you were there, it took me a long time to get to the anger. I didn't even know I was that angry. So it's just a process. You have to allow yourself to go through it, but don't do it alone. You don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Yeah.
So, that's what I would,
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how I would answer that.
That's great. That's great advice. And I think you mentioned the critique group, and the critique group being the group of 3 other writers that you worked with continuously throughout the course of both the narrative project and then our work afterwards. And those intimates were people who knew your story and could really hold you in place while also focusing on the writing itself.
Absolutely. And you begin to, when you see that the effect that your writing is having on these other writers, when you hear the honest, the raw, the bold, the just the blatant critique, you begin to remember, okay, this is about the writing, and that's truly what saved me. Just knowing in the end that's what it was. And without critique, I think also you tend to look at it from a much less objective view, or subjective view. I think that the different points of view, because all 3 of them could have completely different reactions to your writing. And I think that's healthy. Mm-hmm. I think you realize, okay, what I'm feeling is really personal. And this is really healthy to realize that all of our journeys are personal. So it's okay to cry. It's okay to get angry. It's okay to get upset, because that's how we feel. Mm-hmm. And if that's what you have to do to get this book out of you and into your computer, then I'm all for it. Yeah. But just make sure that you go for the hugs as well. You need the hugs too. Yeah. So, yeah.
I remember one moment when you said to me, you were writing about your biological mother and father, and those were tough people. They were hard people, and they created a lot of havoc. But you said, I love these characters on the page. And I was so excited to hear you say that, because I understood that you were turning the corner from really bringing all that trauma back into your body, into putting it onto the page and creating an experience for the readers.
Absolutely. And someone had, I was just talking to someone tonight about it, where she wished that, she's a writer as well, good friend of mine, and she had said that she wished she had chosen a different life. And I said, I used to wonder why other people got better lives, but I knew people that had worse lives. It's all relative. But I'm beginning to see the shiny sparkles in the mud. And that's what you have to do. You have to sift through until you get through, and then you realize, okay, these are characters on the stage of the play of my life. And if you can distance yourself, and you do have to go through the process. It took me a long time, but I'm a year and a half out now, and I'm okay. I can do this. I have, but you have to go through the process, because if you don't, you'll never finish. Yeah. You'll just keep resisting, because that's what we do to protect ourselves. That self-preservation is the biggest motivator for procrastination for me. Mm-hmm. I need to protect myself. And the way, go to lunch with a friend and throw in another load of laundry. And but when I break through it and I say no, and I sit my ass in the chair and I get it done, I'm really, really happy. Mm-hmm. I did it. Yeah. It's huge. It's a huge relief. It's cathartic. And the possibilities of my written word, if it can help anyone, even one person, if I can help one person, it is it. Yeah. So,
you're really speaking to that quote that Maya Angelou has, that there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. And so that first layer of getting it out and the emotional journey of that, and then later the craft of turning it into turning it into a story that you're not quite as close to anymore. You mentioned a little bit about that journey, and I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to the practical challenges of writing your book, because you had this whole childhood that you had to cull through and then turn it into a narrative, and it's beautiful, and I have no doubt you'll be finding a publisher for it soon. But there were some pretty practical challenges in the writing process. Can you speak to what some of those were?
Yeah, I think unlike a lot of memoirists, I had an abundance of material. What my grandmother saved, every letter I wrote her, every letter my mother wrote, just pictures and journals. And my foster mother handed me a journal at the age of 12 and said, write what you're feeling. I still have all of that. And that was my biggest challenge, was culling through that and saying, okay, I can't possibly include everything, but what is really important? And I'm still doing that. I'm still trying to narrow that down. But I have gotten to the point where it's, I had to sit down. I went through, and the letters that I was absolutely not going to use, I simply had to pass them on. I had to shred them so I wouldn't keep going back. And I didn't need them. I had read them. They're in my heart. They're in my head. And I think that it was all the stuff. It was all the memories. I have this photographic memory. And I had to narrow that down as well. And right. I'm still doing that.
Right.
and finding permission in my head to say, okay, you're an important memory, but you just don't belong in this book. That's really tough, because you need to validate every single traumatic moment, every beautiful moment, everything that pops to mind. You feel like you need to validate it, and you can do that.
Yeah,
include it all, unless you're going to write volumes, and
right.
But I think that was trying not to let the world take away from my writing time. I think we all have that.
Yeah.
I was going through a divorce. Kids graduate high school and go to college. I moved. And all of that, tough. I had contractors here while we were having critique.
You did.
But you have to push through. Remember that?
I do.
But I didn't let it stop me. I kept my critique. And here's the thing about critique, and I don't know if it's helpful for everyone, but everyone I know that has participated has said that they would not be where they are without it. It's how you approach it. If
That's
it's
right.
a drag and it's a deadline and I have to submit this week, it's not going to be helpful. But if you use it as an opportunity to have brilliant writers look at your stuff, people that you respect, I would not have 120,000 words like I have said. I began with a few essays. Then I participated in a few of your critiques, and that went about 6 to 9 months, I believe they were, a couple of them.
Yep.
And now I have a book.
Yep.
And yeah,
and I think
hand to God.
You point out something really, really important, that writing alone is overrated. We have a big story that writers just sit alone in their houses and write, but they don't. They all have editors, critique readers, beta readers, and you also said something else that I thought was really important for anyone writing their memoir or novel, but especially for those who are writing about hard things, that you need to build your life around your writing rather than your writing around your life. And that's what you did. You centered it. You made the decision, I'm not going to let this drag on forever. some people do, and that's fine, because sometimes you need a long time to decide that you're really going to dig in. But you really said, I'm going to spend 2 years on this, and I'm going to throw myself into it and organize my life around it. And that's how a book gets done. A book gets done by organizing the rest of your life around the writing of the book.
Absolutely. And if I did not have our calendar, I wouldn't be anywhere. Resistance would have won. Yeah. So that accountability, knowing that someone was waiting, is what I needed. Yeah. And I know a lot of writers need that. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you've given a lot of great advice to other writers. I'm wondering what I know that your dream is that this book that you've written, A Careless Man's Careful Daughter, and that goes into publication, and you have big dreams for the book itself. So I guess that one of the questions that I want to ask you as we finish up our conversation here, Renee, is what do you hope other people, when they pick up this book, whether their background is, has foster care in it or not, what do you really hope that people get out of this book when they read it finally one day soon?
I hope that my readers will know that no matter where you come from, your life is up to you. Where you go is up to you. I have a line in my book that I lived this life so I could write this book. I think that I would like to help. And all you have is a cell phone, and you can watch this video, but you can't afford a hotel room or dinner. But if you're watching this, know that you can change your life when all the odds are against you. I starved. I froze on the streets of Los Angeles. I was abandoned. I had everything was against me. No one thought that I could or would go anywhere. I mean, probably the best gift that I was given was nobody expected anything from me. You read my book, and I hope you walk away with the fact that you can not only survive your past, but you can thrive.
Wow.
I hope so. The world, whatever you choose to do, the universe will conspire to help you. If that's in your heart, my life is a testament to that. So lovely. Believe in yourself.
So lovely. So lovely, Renee.
I hope that's good.
No, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And it's, it's the thing that I always say to writers is that if you can get behind your story, people often ask, is this story worth writing, or is this story anything anybody's ever going to care about? And my answer is always, if you believe in it, if you get behind it, and you put your heart and soul into it, then the reader will too. So I think you and I share a philosophy around that.
Absolutely. You know what? Build that book up. Let people know why your story should be told.
That's right.
Why millions of people should read your book. Yeah. Believe in yourself, believe in your book, and that belief will become contagious.
Thank you. Oh, Renee, thank you so much for talking with us tonight, with us. Yeah, so just so appreciate you being here. All right.
Thank you, Cami. I love you to pieces.
Love you too. Love you to pieces. Bye.